Hi, my name's Dave Adams and you're watching the Core Mechanic, and today we are doing number 96 on Mike Selinker's list of 100 games you absolutely, positively must know how to play. Dixit. Dixit is designed by Jean-Louis Roubira. And I have to say, I looked through many reviewers and no one tried to say his name. I'm the only one. Me, this guy. Probably got it completely wrong, but I gave it a go. It was published in 2008, won the 2010 Spiel des Jahres. It's published by Asmodee. It plays 3 to 6 players in about 30 minutes. It's also described as the gamer's party game, so there's a lot going on. Let's discuss it. As someone who has used it regularly as a gateway game for getting people into gaming, as well as being able to pull it out at gaming events with people who are long-term gamers. Everyone seems to be able to get into it pretty quickly. It's used as a nice filler by gamers. I've only seen it live up to its up to that legend, so I'm happy calling it a gamer's game too. The game brings in a lot of European elements, including the fact that it is non-combative. It keeps everyone in the game. It uses some really great, just some really great design features, which I think warrant explanation. So let's have a quick look at how to actually do a turn. Each turn begins with a storyteller. That person has to choose a card and say a word or a sentence or something, and everyone else then chooses a card which they think matches what was said, and then everyone votes on the cards. Obviously you can't vote on your own, but the idea is to find the storytellers. Let's have a quick go. So what do you think of when I say dreaming of a better life? Dreaming of a better life. 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 Now, out of these cards, which one would you choose? Well, if you chose this one, then you're correct. Now, in terms of scoring, if everybody either chooses the storyteller's card or nobody chooses the storyteller's card, then the storyteller gets 0 points and everybody else gets 2 points. If anything else happens, with some people choosing the storyteller, some people not, then the storyteller and those who selected the card score 3 points, and those who didn't choose the storyteller's card scores 0 points. Then everybody whose card was selected that isn't the storyteller also gains a point. Now, why is that interesting? Because on a single turn, I could score more points than the storyteller. And there's a lot of advantage to being storyteller because you set the trend, you get to determine the card, everybody takes a turn at it, so it's fair and equal. But at the same time, it's disadvantaged by the fact that you may not be scoring as many points as someone else. The game ends when the last card has been drawn, and whoever's furthest along the scoring track is the winner. But the interesting thing for me is that there's no real need for a catch-up mechanic in this game. With scoring the way that it is, the game keeps everybody pretty much up to par really well. The game does a really good job of creating this rather pleasant experience. Yes, it's a party game. Yes, it's almost competitive, but that competitive nature isn't really the highlight or feature of the game. It's hard to sit there and play competitively when you're so invested in the feel and the experience of the artwork and trying to know your other players. And I think that's because Dixit works on a few different levels. Previously, we've discussed in other videos the concept of magic circle, the concept of metagaming, and the concept of systems in games. All of these, I think, come to bear really strongly in Dixit. And that's primarily because Dixit tends to stretch and play with some of those systems and those rules. The reason you can't focus so strongly on the competitive element of this game is that there's no way to tweak the rules or to interpret the rules that gives you an edge or an advantage over anybody else. In Dixit, it really is about the player interaction, which highlights the whole metagaming element. This game, even with using the same card set, will be a unique experience with different play groups. Because fundamentally what you're doing is trying to select a card and communicate what card you've chosen, but only to a couple of people in the group so that not everybody chooses your card and not everybody chooses someone else's card. And that's trying to keep a really interesting balance. And so you're trying to encrypt messages and you're trying to do it for an audience. And that's really the key here. This is why this game steps out of the norms of a normal rules-based environment and starts to play with the systems of interaction between players. The idea of me influencing the board or the game space or me trying to take control over the board just can't happen. I have to know my players. I have to know my audience. I have to communicate to my audience, and I have to do so in a way that takes abstract images and tries to communicate something specific, but in a way that is abstract enough that certain people understand it, but not so abstract that nobody understands it. That's a challenge. The nice thing is that even if you know a couple of people in the group well enough to the point where you communicate on that special level, give those other players enough time and they'll start to work out what's going on. And in fact, you can't just keep using the same line for the same card because people will work out what it is. And this is one of the reasons I love using Dixit as a gateway game. The fact that it's not so competitive means that it gives people a chance to experiencing a game environment where there's beautiful artwork, they get to enjoy a game that they don't have to feel the pressure of competing on. Also, there is no downtime with this game. Everybody is invested in every turn because you're either the storyteller or you're trying to work out the storyteller's card. This sort of gameplay just opens itself up to such a casual, relaxed environment, but at the same time, thoroughly engaging, thoroughly thought-provoking. The fun thing for me is when I use it as a gateway game for young students. And I've played this with kids from grade 3 and up. The reason it works so well is that a lot of the time, the students have a way of communicating and viewing the world that is so completely different to my own that it actually gives me some insight into how they think and what they're thinking. Now, it's also a great game to help the development of young people. While I say that they like to communicate on different levels, a lot of kids at that year level are still thinking very concretely, very literally. And to have a game that forces them to think abstractly really is a mental challenge. It helps kids to really elevate their thinking, to take it to beyond something. They have to look at the symbolism of an object. They have to think differently about a picture. And for some kids at that age level, that's a really great challenge, and it's a wonderful learning experience. Now, if there is anything else to be said about Dixit as to why I love it so much, it's the fact that my wife will actually play this game. She's not a gamer, she doesn't enjoy playing board games, but she will play Dixit quite happily for quite a long time. These rules are so simple, it's such an easy way to play, that the game is just accessible for anybody. But working on that abstract level, working on that metagame level where it's about the players and how they interact, really is an element of the game that requires a skill of empathy that I think is a challenge for some, but it's also an interesting experience for others. Certainly for my wife, who is strongly empathetic and has a really good sense of how to communicate with others, I think that she finds that an enjoyable part of the game. So what does this teach me as a game designer? The artwork is amazing, and kudos to Dixit for just having one of the prettiest games to play around. And I think big props needs to go out to Marie Cadouet, who did the artwork for the original Dixit game and some subsequent releases. The artwork is just so engaging and enticing that it just sucks you in from the get-go. And when you see those cards laid out on the table, it doesn't really matter after a while. You sort of sit there and go, oh, that is beautiful artwork. And as much as I just love to sit here and gush over that artwork, I think it's important and integral to the game. There's so much going on in these pictures and so many clever elements of emotion and storytelling going into this artwork that it really does give you the ability to look at a plethora of cards in your hand and think that any one of them could relate to the story or the words that were said. And so on many levels, there's a lot to capture in the artwork. If it was just a single image, it probably wouldn't work. But each image almost has its own story, but elements of story that connect with so many other elements. And that's a really clever, well thought through design presentation. And in terms of that presentation, it makes me wonder how I can use the artwork. It's just something I don't think about. When I'm designing, I'm thinking in terms of that square can be that triangle can be that circle can be that, and I'll just use some symbols to represent whatever. But to think that the artwork has that much of an impact means it would have had to have been a key element of thought from the get-go. This game challenges me on doing directly competitive games. I think it's just something in the formation of my gaming DNA where a lot of the early games I experienced were directly competitive. I spent a long time playing Yu-Gi-Oh! On a tournament level where I would travel around Australia engaging in tournaments competitively to rise to the top. Very rarely rising to the top, but that's what I did. The reality is, when I think of games, I don't naturally think of games that aren't directly competitive. And while this is, yes, a competitive game with a winner, I'd have to say it's not the main focus of the game. It's thinking through that experience and really bringing in elements of gameplay which I haven't often considered. While I tend to think about the cognitive elements of gaming, such as problem solving, critical literacy, logic, deduction, I don't often think about the emotional elements of gaming, thinking in terms of the different emotional intelligences I could be drawing on. Building a game that requires empathy is not just a nice warm fuzzy experience, it's a game that challenges us to think or to operate on a different level. And that's something I haven't considered. You really do need a sense of empathy to engage and to know your audience and to communicate to your audience. And I don't tend to think like that, especially in any of the designs I've come up with so far. What a wonderful job they've done on Dixit. And it's something that I think I can see very clearly why this would be on Mike Selinker's list. Not only is it what great, simple, smooth mechanics, it has levels of game design which I just think are thoroughly engaging and challenging to me as someone who is working towards designing a game. It also just is a beautiful game to look at. Clearly a most deserving winner of the Spiel des Jahres, and one worthy of being in any person's collection. Look, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed what we've been talking about. If you liked what we've been talking about, please hit that like button. If you're new to this community, please hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you on board with us. Until next time, my name's Dave Adams, and you've been watching The Core Mechanic.